How effective are you as a boss? And specifically, how does your mood as a boss impact your organization? Hey, everyone, it's Mark Dolfini. It's good to see you. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about optimism versus pessimism and how your business is impacted by your mood as the boss. Now, let me be clear about this. I'm going to be talking a little bit about optimism versus pessimism. And optimism versus pessimism is not really about the having a rosy outlook versus having a negative or dark outlook, right? Instead, it's really more about three things. So let's unpack each of these three things in order. First and foremost, it is the degree by which you view a negative circumstance as temporary or permanent. All right. If you view things to be bad, always bad, or that's just the way things go for you, like you just can, everything you touch always breaks, or the causes are somehow systemic, you're likely to be more on the pessimistic end of the spectrum. For those people who tend to be more optimistic, they tend to view things, especially bad events, as just temporary. All right. So that's the first thing. The second thing is they tend to view, sorry, get my slide up there, how much perceived control that they have over those events. So the first one about, again, this is about optimism versus pessimism. So let's not lose sight of that here real quick, is how much perceived control you have over those circumstances. The pessimist and the pessimistic boss believes that when things go wrong, it's just the system working against them, that they have very little control over what happened or very little influence on the circumstance. Optimists, on the other hand, believe that they do have an influence on the outcome of the circumstance, and they will even spend time in reflection on how they could have caused this. Now, these first two components here, the first thing is the degree to which you view negative circumstances as temporary or permanent, and secondly, how much perceived control you have over those circumstances. Those two things around optimism and pessimism were first discovered by Marty Seligman and this guy, Steve Meyer, who were two psychologists who came to the understanding of this phenomenon called learned helplessness. That when suffering is beyond your control, you just simply give up. Right now, this relates to the third component, which let's get right into the third component, which is your personal relationship with change. So how do you view change? For many people, especially business owners, the discomfort of suffering is more tolerable than the discomfort of change. And because they're willing to suffer more than they're willing to change, they stay stuck. Now, I run into this quite a bit. I actually run into this with people who come to me who want me to work with them as a strategist. And for them, it's much more comfortable for them to stay stuck than it is to actually affect the change that they know they need to have so they can actually move out of that position of stuck, out of that station, right? And I have noticed that this correlates very directly with whether a person has a growth mindset versus what's called a fixed mindset. Now, I want you to think of this as an adaptation continuum. So those who are on the growth mindset extreme, they tend to consider intelligence and circumstances to be changeable and evolving, where those on the fixed mindset end of the continuum believe that intelligence is pretty much set by the time we get to a certain station in life, and that circumstances are just more or less permanent. They just don't change. So in this paradigm, the growth mindset is far more open to adaptation. So those are the types of people that will come to me. They want to work with me, and they will find a way to work with me. They don't let busyness or anything else. They're like, no, whatever you're bringing, I need it because I have got to get out of this situation that I'm in. When many more times people would even if they say like, yeah, I see what you're saying, I could definitely use the help, but they often adapt this mindset of, I would rather fail on my own than to succeed with your help. And I get that. I understand that, because I actually exhibited that myself. But when you combine a growth mindset with that of an optimist, now you have the recipe for a far more effective leader in business. And the truth is that the paradigm of the leader often becomes the paradigm of the business. And that's due to something called social contagion. So, for example, let me take this slide down. So, the social contagion, um, it's it's funny because social contagion can even happen in something like obesity, where obesity can become contagious. You're like, what? Obesity is contagious? Well, surprising research that was performed by these two scientists, Nicholas Christakis and James Fowler, they found a link between something that you've never considered to be contagious, and that's obesity. Their research found that there was a likelihood of becoming obese increased by 171% if a friend of yours also becomes obese. And this is how social contagion works, right? That it's a very real phenomenon, and how your bad mood as the boss can easily become the bad mood for the organization. Now, there's a whole study behind this where they did this between the study between spouses, and the study between friends, the study between brothers and sisters or siblings. It is a very real phenomenon, and it's well beyond statistical significance to prove that social contagion is a real phenomenon. So you're thinking, okay, fine. Well, if you want to be an effective boss, what do I do about this? Can any of this be changed? First of all, knowing that it absolutely can is the first step. So this is all backed by neurological studies of the brain that shows the amazing plasticity of the nerves, which can grow and be rebuilt within the brain, right? That is a subject known as neuroplasticity. So yes, from a biological perspective, the brain can rewire itself. The subject of the mind is a little bit trickier. It's a different matter entirely. This is where the subject of education, in my mind, comes into play. I submit to you education in all forms, from reading and listening and watching videos like this, followed by, and this is the key, periods of thought and review. And it's the subsequent periods of review and consideration which is what allows for transformation. Now, this takes advantage of something known as the spacing effect. It's also known as the lag effect, and that's very common in education. That's basically where you take a period of time from exposure to a new topic to reviewing your notes days later, generally 4 days later, then a week later, then 2 weeks later. And that really helps cement this new knowledge and allows for that transformation to occur. So other forms of education can even be something such as coaching, even as counseling or even therapy. The way that I see it, anything that helps you understand how you think and why you think the way you think is education in my book. I know a lot of people who read a lot of books. I mean, I read a lot of books. I know a lot of people who read a lot of books and likewise listen to a massive amounts of videos and podcasts and books on Audible, but they take very few, if any, notes, and they allow for no period of reflection or transformation. Similarly, many business owners are often multitasking. Trying to do work while listening to these voices in the background often yield to very little understanding and very subsequent little transformation. So it's not uncommon for business owners to report listening to podcasts, right? And I know this happens to me, where you'll have let's say the podcaster says something and a rogue thought pops into your head, and you're literally a million miles away while the podcast keeps running. Now, I don't listen to podcasts, but I do listen to Audible from time to time. But by the time I return to conscious thought, the voices on the other end have moved on to a completely different thread. So I'm either backing up or just kind of saying, all right, well, I don't even know how long I was gone, but I kind of go back. So it's, for me, Audible is just difficult to learn from. I'm not a Audible type learner. So in my own case, obviously this is true, but it's difficult for me to stay on the task of listening for very long periods of time. So I have to give myself a little bit of grace there. So my suggestion for something like this is take notes and take time and make sure you're allowing for time for periods of reflection in between the time when you're learning, between the time when you're initially exposed, and taking time to be deliberate in your practice from 1 or 4 days or a week later or 14 days later to allow for that transformation to occur. If you're working with a coach, then have them help hold you accountable to the things that they are teaching you. so you can absolutely engage in that transformation that you're looking for. All right, that is all I have. Thanks for sticking around. I am going to share with you real quick, if you are interested in joining our Facebook tribe, this is what the website currently looks like, or the page, the web page looks like. I will put the link in the description. And also, if you are interested in getting a signed copy of the Time Wealthy Advantage, the book is there on the far left, but there's also some guides there. Let me get my mug out of the way. So if you're interested in getting a signed copy of the Time Wealthy Advantage, that is on the left. The guides are also available for a few extra bucks. There on the right, you get 4 of those, and you will get it's signed. In addition to that, you will also get a 45-minute coaching session with me. It's not a sales call. It is 100% your time, and you can use that however you like. So that is all I have for tonight. I really appreciate you sticking around. Take care.